Okay, so in this particular feature, I'm focusing on using my Eurorack modular setup to create interesting sonic landscapes with drones. Now, if you've studied what a drone is in the musical world outside of, say, electronic music, you're probably pretty familiar with the fact that certain instruments and types of music, organ music with the pipe organ, the lute comes to mind, as does, of course, the bagpipe. A drone is a constant pitch that's played as the base or foundation of music. And I think probably a bagpipe or a pipe organ, I think, really reminds us of just sonically and harmonically what drone music sounds like. You also, of course, have musical styles and genres that are very much about using drones, all sorts of ambient electronic music. There is drone metal, so-called subgenre of metal, with bands like Earth as an example. If you know, they're very down-tempo music that uses very foundational drones as part of that music that lays sort of a bed for the instrumentation to play on top of it. So for me, what's useful about a Eurorack setup in terms of drones is the principle that you can start with something that is relatively simple in nature but becomes extremely complex harmonically and sonically. So you could certainly use just about anything for a drone. You could even use something off of VST if you wanted something digital. So many modules out there allow you simply with a trigger or even without a trigger input to create a constant pitch, and then that pitch can be modulated and modified over the course of, in this case, your various Eurorack modules. So for me, it's one of the most fun and interesting things to do. But it certainly, for all of its simplicity at the onset, it can take, I think, I would say, a lot of time to execute. So what I'm doing here is I have, you can see on the screen here with my ETC, just the oscilloscope going, and I'm using the Mofensief MSG2, which is kind of an interesting drone unit because if you have the chipset for the Muskrat, which I'm kind of obsessed with the Muskrat right now as a my drum setup, my electronic drum setup on my Eurorack. What's cool is you can actually interchange some of these chips. So it's kind of neat if you have a few of these, and allows you with the chipset, which runs around $30, to do some interesting things with your modules and also, in this case, the drone, the MSG2. They have a new Stargazer out that you can also take a look at. But this is a very simple unit. It has, I won't go through all the waves with you, you can look for some demos out there, but it has a series of waves, and then it has two function knobs that change based on the particular wave that's being played and whether or not the switch is pressed here. So for me, just on the onset, you can hear this right now. It allows me to simply create a drone tone that is interesting to me, that has sonic depth or complexity. And we're adjusting the pitch here. And you're seeing what's happening with the waveform on the screen. And I'm trying to think if this is not the wavetable one, but we're getting some really harmonically, sonically complex waves that we see on the screen here. I'm saying harmonically because in addition to having the drone going, so this is, let me just suggest, this is essentially the base of what I'm trying to do sonically. Again, you could use any number of sonic inputs or outputs from whatever you're trying to drone out into your Eurorack setup. So it doesn't really matter, but of course every sonic device has its own character. So what I plan to do in the future is to create a track based on this actually, and it'll probably use this very complex drone in combination with one of my homemade percussion instruments, so you can check that out. But what's really happening here, let me just take you through the routing. I have the sound from the MSG, the drone, going into the Erica Fusion VCO, and then also using a splitter, one of my favorite tools in the Eurorack setup. Using that, I'm just simply splitting that audio signal, so part of it, and it's off screen here, can go to the ETC. So the ETC is taking the audio signal and turning it into, in this case, showing us the waveform on the oscilloscope. The other modes are more interesting, and I use those when I'm trying to do something visually unique in a video. For this case, we're just looking at the waveform. So I'm using that splitter, but it's going into the Fusion VCO, and this is one of those modules that for me is growing and growing on me. When I initially got it, you know, it has the tube set up, it has very unique sound, but it's pretty large in terms of HP, in terms of size, and it's one of those that really does allow for a lot of subtlety, which is a great thing. But upon initial reflection, trying to use it, I found myself like, what exactly is happening here? And let me actually pull out the 1 volt per octave. And I don't know if you actually heard that, because I don't have, this is coming out of maths, which I don't really have going yet in terms of the cycling. But what I want to do is, this drone is going into the Fusion. I'm taking both the mix out and the VCO out into the Tip-Top Audio wave folder. And this is one of my favorite modules, and so we'll essentially alter and add harmonic complexity using the wave folder. And wave folders are wonderful. If I had to pick a favorite module other than maths and my envelope generator, it might be some of my wave folders. So I'm taking both of those outputs, and that's going to be interesting because then I can adjust some of the parameters to affect the VCO coming in, and then the mix out. Essentially, by using that audio in, I'm using this, routing this also as an effects unit. So it has that potential to really add some harshness, also some, again, complexity to the sound that's coming in. I will then use the maths output, and I'll use that, I think, both for the 1 volt per octave and the FMN to add some depth in terms of modulation. And let me just make sure here. So this is then going into, so this is just going into the wave folder, and then I have my output coming out into my mixer recording this. I'm not using the subdivider right now. It's one of those on this wave folder module that I always found the subdivider somewhat challenging to use. What I'll do now is just take you through some of the different potentials. Again, you can watch on the screen here with the oscilloscope and see what's happening. So I can, as I said earlier, adjust my original drone, and that I think is always cool to do, to get it to where I want it to be sonically. And then I can start folding in, and I can go for some subtlety, almost to nothingness, and I can go back and just get these really expansive, interesting textures. And you see how the wave is changing on the screen in terms of its complexity. I'm in that point here where I'm getting stuck by my own cables, but we'll go back around 12 o'clock, because I'm not just going to use the wave folder. And by the way, Maths is doing double, if not triple duty. Some of these patches actually here are for my percussion setup. So as usual, it looks like a spaghetti bowl, but really I'm just using 3 modules here: the wave folder, Maths, which is so many of our favorite in terms of that module, and then the Fusion VCO. So what I thought here I could do is I could turn the cycle on, because again, we're getting modulation from Maths into the wave folder. And then we can begin to tweak some of our channels on Maths. And so we're getting just a different level of sonic variety. We can dial in some harshness as we like. And just like with our envelope generator, if we want to do some complex things, we can do that with our two outward channels here on maths. And there are just so many opportunities to adjust the timbre, the harmonic content. You can, again, look at the oscilloscope and see what's happening there. We can go back up here to our Fusion VCO. And because, again, we're folding these two outputs from the Erica VCO, we can start to really affect things rather dramatically using the FM level. And depending on where we're dialed in here, on the wave folder, you may not hear all that change. Let's see if we do the color. There we get some real interesting higher frequency harmonics, it sounds like to me. Sweep that down. So this is very nice here if we adjust the frequency. It's essentially adjusting the VCO, the pure signal, since our other channel is the drone from the MSG coming into the mix out, so you get some really nice characteristics there with the wave folding. It leads me to believe the way I have this dialed in, it's our VCO channel. A little more prominent. We still hear the other one though too, which is our drone coming into the audio in for that tube effect. So you kind of get the idea there. Bring this back down frequency-wise. And so there's just so many interesting things we could do sonically, harmonically, using one simple drone sound waveform that's being affected. So many of these, not really that many, but 3 modules. The other thing I wanted to do, going back to the maths, was to take our channel here, and we'll first put in the FM in. Should hear a pulse. And on the screen you're getting a sense of that. You see that pulse, and I'll dial this back a little bit. Really nice pulse developing there. So I could continue to dial that in if I wanted a tempo of that pulse. And you know, there are quite a few VSTs nowadays that try to replicate some of this. I'm thinking of output signal, if you're familiar with that VST, which is really wonderful, but it's often based on some of these like pulse, almost like modules or sound sources that allow you to layer different pulses. What's fun about Eurorack, keeping with the theme of why Eurorack, is you're doing this on the fly, you're doing it on your own, and you're really fine-tuning things. So I adjust one thing or 2 things on maths, that affects things here, but then because I'm also using a wave folder, I can continue to evolve that sound as I like it. And you're seeing and hearing just how much that sound is changing. Just in the most subtle senses. And I could continue to do this. Slow that pulse down a little bit. I could really make it harsh with our VCO module, the Erica. Right, you can really do anything I want. And in a performance setting, and what I'll be doing in this piece is essentially doing this in real time. And I think I'll only use 2 sonic sources. I'll use these 3 modules in our Mofen-Zief MSG2 and a sort of percussive instrument that uses guitar strings. I think what I'll do with that is I'll put it through the mutable clouds, which gives really interesting ambient sounds with the Parasite firmware installed. But my attitude on this is the main performance will be with these 3 modules, and I'll have 2 hands going at once, and maybe I'll tweak some things here and also here at the same time, and try to really do it as a performance instrument, because I think that Eurorack really has that ability, particularly when people do ambient stuff and things with drones, to really act as a true instrument in terms of adjusting things. And because of the nature of the modulation between one module and the other, how exponential that is really in terms of the effects of one and the other, it's an instrument unlike many others, I think, because of that fact that you can do so much sonically and harmonically in a rich and also subtle sense. So we'll dial that back again. And then one more thing to show you, I'll just take the same output from maths, which was going in the FM, and then I'll put in the 1 volt per octave. And you see it's quite different. Just going to adjust down here. I think I'm hearing there, yeah, when you adjust the dry wet, you're getting a little difference. So it's just so easy in so little time to sonically alter what you're working on. And then I can do one more thing with mass. I kind of like that pulse. That pulse is really rich. Maybe getting some different harmonics there, it sounds like. Get that where I want it. Pretty nice and harsh. And then I could go back to my original drone source and further augment what I'm doing. And sweep the frequency. And enjoy the result.